With a long-awaited revamp of the Byzantine Empire, a new way to run empires in general, a new influence resource, new personal estate holdings, an entirely new way to play with unlanded characters that roam the world, and so much more, Roads to Power is one of the most quintessential expansions to CK3 ever. And in this video, I'll show you why. But first guys, a lot of work and sleepless nights goes into making these videos, which is why I'm extra proud to have partnered with Instant Gaming. Instant Gaming is a popular service that offers both upcoming, brand new and older titles at great discounts, and I love using it myself to save on various games of all genres. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by following my link below and save tons of money on games you'd otherwise spend a lot more on elsewhere, like let's say Crusader Kings 3. And now, back to CK3. You know, back in 2020, CK3 was more or less a shell of what CK2 was. It felt like features were missing or that CK3 was lacking that special sauce that CK2 cooked with. And back then I was more keen on going back to CK2 than continuing on. But now, with update after update, and on this essentially 4-year anniversary month, Roads to Power enters the stage and once and for all confirms that CK3 had it in itself to become something brand new and even better. For if it wasn't for the 3D courts, the entirely new religious systems, regional struggles, or a system of traveling across the map, Roads to Power introduces major features that simply weren't possible in CK2, and that now, depending on whether you wish to go on grand adventures or not, you may not want to live without. But let's talk about my darling first, Byzantium, and one obvious feature of this update we haven't talked about yet, that new start date. Roads to Power unlocks an entirely new era to begin your campaign in, namely 1178, a time of great upheaval, and is rather iconic since it's around the time period when the movie Kingdom of Heaven takes place. Here, England is suddenly a major power in France, threatening to upend the balance of power in Western Europe. The Holy Roman Empire must contend with an emboldened and independent Italy, whose princes and republics know they're just a war away from being re-holified. In Spain, the Reconquista is well underway, threatened only by a unified Moorish emirate. And in the east, Byzantium remains a powerful force to be reckoned with, yet one who must stand against the rising tide of the Seljuk Turks in Anatolia, while the Crusader states spearheaded by the Kingdom of Jerusalem experience a most uncertain time, as the Ayyubids led by Sultan Saladin wishes to reclaim the Holy Land once and for all. This is an age of what-ifs and why-nots, an age where crusades will either save Christianity in the Holy Land or abandon it in darkness. The era of the Third Crusade, which is the pivotal event occurring not long after this beginning, is an era of characters that might at times mean more to you than even those of 1066. England and France might begin with a Henry and a Louis, but among their children awaits a future King Richard the Lionheart and a Philip II, both who will join the Third Crusade as allies, but who later will fight bitterly over dominion of France, a war which ultimately will decide the fate of Europe. In the Holy Roman Empire, Kaiser Frederick Barbarossa, who would lead the empire for 35 long years and who already went to Jerusalem in the Second Crusade, is also intent on joining the coming Third, but only fate will decide if he ends up drowned in a river. And of course, in the Holy Land, King Baldwin leads a weakened Jerusalem with his sister Sibylla as his heir, and Saladin leads the powerful Ayyubids, who intends to descend upon the kingdom at any moment. For myself, a person who not only adores this time period because of Kingdom of Heaven, but also because of Medieval II's Crusades campaign, this is a very welcoming age. But importantly, it's also an age where Byzantium, whom I realized it took a while to get back to, is facing a lot of challenges, but with this DLC, a lot of opportunities as well. You see, this is a pivotal moment in Byzantine history. Under the emperorship of Basileus Manuel, Byzantium stands strong. In possession of large territories in Europe and still in control of much of Anatolia, it remains a powerful player, and if you play your cards right, it's far from impossible to bounce back. But you must now deal with Hungarian and Bulgarian raiders in the north, the Sultanate of Rum in the east, seriously consider protecting Jerusalem in the south, and of course deal with your own internal problems. And this is where Byzantium truly shines in Roads to Power. First of all, Byzantium is no longer a feudal realm, but an administrative empire, a new government form in CK3 reserved for realms who adopt it. An administrative realm's most crucial aspect is the fact that it runs on influence and a new system of succession and governorship. You see, instead of the feudal system, where titles are passed down from title holders to heirs within a family, titles in an administrative empire are held by a governor, and is then given to an influential character who has vied to inherit the title through influence investment. Sure, the current holder can have their son or heir inherit the title, but it requires that they invest enough influence to do so. and who will be the next governor is further influenced by a bunch of other factors too. If the current governor has no heir, or there is no one else in line to take over the governorship through the use of influence, the title returns to the emperor or empress, and they will then be able to hand it out to anyone they wish. At the core of this lies influence, a new resource which is gained and lost within administrative empires and essentially represents your political power within the realm. Influence is first and foremost used to assert yourself in succession battles for governorships, meaning administrative duchies or kingdoms within the empire. Here, a convenient new menu will show you all of the relevant governorships, and you can influence any of them to help determine their next candidate. And you can do so by either aiding a candidate of your choice or sabotaging a candidate you don't like. This is an option available for anyone in the realm, of course, so it's vital to spend your influence wisely and use it where it counts, or where it dukes. Consider also that influence functions the same way the other resources does. It is a spendable resource, but by accumulating it over time, you also inherently become more influential, which lends you a better starting scheming success chance for political schemes. In essence, this means that while titles aren't hereditary per se, they can effectively become so if you continuously focus on keeping a title in the family through the use of influence, and if you manage to avoid losing it by, say, revolting against the emperor, losing a war, and having it removed. It also means that if you are a governor, it's possible to amass control of several governorships if enough influence is used effectively, or that you can influence who else becomes governors in neighboring provinces. In other words, the candidacy system allows for an open system of succession where everyone participates out in the open, yet still one that requires careful maneuvering and planning if you wish to get ahead. It's even possible to outwardly depose another governor, which immediately removes them from power and installs the next character in the line of succession. And this is where the fun begins. You see, we're still playing out in the open now, but let's say that you are a governor that's unmarried. Marrying tactically in the Byzantine Empire means to sometimes marry strong heirs to other governorships. Because if you now have enough influence or power in the realm, you may force the current leader to step down, which now immediately installs your spouse as the new governor if they are first in line. And of course, since any offspring will be of your dynasty, you'll soon find yourself with an easier path to have your dynasty increase its power in the empire. There is, however, more subtle ways to make your mark. We now have a number of new scheming options for administrative realms, schemes which allow you to either bolster your allies or sabotage your opponent's candidacy scores. You can have them increase your score for a specific region, and you can even show your support or disdain for the emperor by fostering their legitimacy in return for favors, or damage it by spending influence. Certain schemes though, like subsuming or basically taking over neighboring themes through influence, are only available to powerful families or above, and this is where an entirely new system enters the fray. You see, Byzantium is not just made up of governors, but families, and the empire distinguishes between the imperial, dominant, powerful, and noble families. Each family's power is based on a number of factors like living dynastic members, family members holding titles, etc., which in turn will determine that house's family score. The more powerful you are, the more options will be open to you, like being able to hold multiple governor titles of the same tier, or being given a discount to promoting candidates. Governor efficiency is another mechanic in administrative realms, where each governor's capabilities are measured based on their skills and traits. Essentially, the higher your governor efficiency, the more taxes and levies you'll be able to get from the province. And like with candidacies, you can also scheme to improve or slander the ability of other governors to run their provinces. It's a feature that's mostly in the background, but which you should try to improve through increasing your character's skill, for example, or devoting yourself to certain lifestyles that increases them. It can also be good to factor in this skill when you choose characters to give certain regions to, since the better they govern, the better it is for the empire. This entire system, how influence interacts with the governorships, and how we now have basically constant empire-wide diplomatic power struggles, since yes, governors cannot go to war with each other, is amazing. It suddenly feels like you're playing in an alternate ecosystem, one where every succession depends on your ability to keep it in the family, but one where you can actually make a more or less immediate impact. Rather than feudal or clan systems, the administrative government form essentially provides you the tools to create primogeniture successions from the start, although there's always the risk of more or less losing it all if you're not using your influence the right way. Rather than focusing on constant conquest, it does make you consider your internal empire options more, find out who your friends are, and carefully consider how to grow your family's power within the borders. And even though it's not technically an elective empire like the Holy Roman Empire, it is one based on candidates, and even the emperor isn't safe safe when both legitimacy, influence, and powerful families have a say in how successions turn out. And I think a lot of players will enjoy the change of pace and dilemmas just as much as I do. And this is where we'll have to talk about another cool feature, the army, and more importantly, the Imperial armies. You see, more than just having your own knights, men-at-arms, and general levies, administrative realms also feature armies that are inherent to the various governorships. This means that even though you personally cannot recruit Varangian guards as men-at-arms, the Imperial title holder can. And whenever the Imperial title changes hands, whomever succeeds the current emperor, the Imperial men-at-arms will always remain the same, unless they of course are increased or diminished in size. This goes for every governorship too, meaning that governors can improve the fighting capabilities of their title outside of their own personal power, and means that you can remain militarily powerful even though you may not own that many personal holdings. In addition, the emperor can, through the use of influence, muster the armies of the various provinces under the rule of the governors in order to substantially increase the size of the active Imperial army. It's a system you might not be aware of right from the get-go, but it's important to pay attention to because it can determine both the strength of your vassals and the possibility to swell your own in times of need. It's also where a system of direct orders and administration come in, which means that you can actually tell your governors what you wish them to focus on. Kinda like province edicts in EU4, you can actually dictate that your vassals focus on certain tasks through the theme administration, like tasking it to be a border province with higher defensive capabilities, strengthening their trade, or assuming a balanced approach. Alongside this is the personal efforts of the characters or the vassal directives, and you can ask your governors to focus on increasing their levies, improving the development of their provinces, converting their faith, promote your culture, construct certain buildings, and more. Likewise, it's not only the liege who can ask vassals to change their administration, but vassals can themselves request to change it, which can be very useful if you want your governorship to develop in a different way, with new priorities. As you can tell, if you want to get as much out of the system as possible, it's good to know where your outside enemies and allies are, where you can focus on trade and civilization, where you should quell unrest, and where it's wise to raise fortifications and defensive capabilities. It's a system that fleshes out even further the administrative realm, and it's truly awesome to see. And what makes it extra fun isn't just the fact that it's a deep system with a lot of granularity and changeability, but that if you don't want to deal with it, you don't really have to. A lot of these systems work on their own in the background by default from the start, the theme system especially, and what's even better is that both liege and vassal can change it up if they wish and have the power to do so. Perhaps this feature especially puts the administration in the administrative empire, and much more than a feudal realm, feels like you're finally able to manage a realm on a deeper level, definitely supplanting the vassal contract of feudal realms. In fact, in a game that has still yet to implement the in-depth law system from CK2, I find that the administrative directives help to bring some of that feeling back, even though they're technically edicts instead of laws. Either way, they're extremely welcome and makes Byzantium and this type of government feel all the more unique and, well, administrative. There is one more feature concerning administrative empires we have to talk about though, and that is the estate system. A brand new feature that essentially allows a minor centralization of power into the hands of the househead of a noble family, and is separated completely from landed titles, meaning you actually don't need to control land to control an estate. An estate is for all intents and purposes almost like owning an independent city that you can expand and improve on, resulting in things like increased income, stress loss, more piety, and better men-at-arms. Raising new or improving buildings does cost a pretty penny just like regular city improvement, so the estate will mean a lot more over time depending on how much you invest into it, and depending on your goals, you'll have to carefully decide whether to improve your estate first or the cities under your control. The schemes we talked about earlier also extend to the estates, as it's possible to go on raids and attack the estates of other estate holders to sack them for gold, lower the influence of the target, and perhaps even dispose of certain family members. What's also interesting about this update is that it comes with a radical new scheme system. First of all, in the planning stage, you're incentivized to recruit co-conspirators who will fulfill different roles, enhancing your ability to not get caught or successfully executing it. But what's more is that as long as your scheme remains a secret over the course of at least 7 months, you gain so-called advantages, which if you accumulate enough, will increasingly improve your chances of success. But the crazy thing about this scheme in particular is that once it's all done, even if you are successful, you're going to end up being known for having executed the scheme. The target family will despise you, and what you'll have to view this as then is a type of family feud, show of force type of thing. Now you may also be the victim of foreign plots against your estate, but by raising defensive buildings, you can increase the likelihood of stopping them in their tracks. Now I think estates and domiciles like these is a very interesting feature, and it's especially important for what we're going to talk about next. For administrative characters though, it's an immersive way to build up your own little wealth haven and to interact with those of others. I do think that the estate UI window is beautifully drawn and I can see what they went for here, and I truly do respect the aim of creating something that looks distinctly medieval. But I have to be honest and say that I wish they had chosen a different art direction. What's interesting about the current state of CK3 is that it doesn't really feature a coherent visual style. The campaign map is rendered in 3D, but zoom far away up and it all turns into a 2D paper map. Enter your royal court and it's all in full 3D. Host a tournament and suddenly you're seeing a sort of gorgeous 2.5D window of tournament grounds and a small town that's fully animated. And now open the estate menu and we're seeing what could have been a medieval drawing or something akin to a tapestry. And personally, I kinda wish the estate menu looked more like the tournament one, where we saw it rendered beautifully and more immersively, where you could see your different buildings increase in size as you went. And even though their drawings do change, which is a nice touch, I just think it's a lost opportunity to make further use of that beautiful tournament UI they made just a few DLCs ago, particularly since I feel like it brings a stronger sense of realism to the game. Further, I think it's a bit of a shame that raiding estates does not give you dread, since it does feel like exerting your power against other families in such a big way is exactly what dread is all about. All in all though, it's always nice to have more ways to spend your money, exert your influence, and deal with other families, and I'm happy that the estate system is here and perhaps also open for further additions in the future. Those were the major features associated with Byzantium and the new administrative realms, but there's an entirely different and yet another massive aspect to Roads to Power. As a first in the Crusader Kings series, or frankly, in any Paradox game as far as I'm aware, it's now possible to play as an unlanded character, aka an adventurer, a person with no titles whatsoever to their name, but one who essentially leads an army for hire, and whose only claim to power is their army camp. To play as one, you can either choose to play as one of the many pre-made unlanded from the character selection screen, with many of them being major historical figures of legend, like Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, or as he's better known as, El Cid, or if you want to truly roleplay, you can even make your own adventurer, like I did when I made a Norwegian Viking for hire in the Kingdom of Jerusalem during what's going to be a very turbulent time. Again, I feel like I have to reiterate here. Unlanded characters own no titles whatsoever, in a game that has for its entire lifetime been all about owning land, and ever more of it. That has meant arranging marriages for alliances and future successions and claims, waging large wars, managing counties and buildings, and administrating the realm through your court and vassals. All of those responsibilities are for all intents and purposes gone as long as you are unlanded, but they have been replaced with new and exciting mechanics to varying degrees. Your camp is your new home, and even though it's always stationed somewhere, you get to decide where that somewhere is. As long as you are prepared for the journey with provisions and travel companions to make sure you don't die on the road, you can literally travel the world, see the sights, visit the cities, and even go fishing if the fancy strikes you. This makes it so CK3 opens up in a whole new way, because while journeying to other cities on say pilgrimages was neat in turns and tournaments onwards, this is something completely different. Your camp kind of acts like its own little city, just like estates do, and you may upgrade your camp with various amenities as you go, and as long as you have the money and the right traits and camp purposes for it. You see, your camp, i.e. your moving realm, must choose a purpose, namely a way of being. This determines your aptitude in various missions you'll be taking on, so a camp with the swords for hire purpose will be better at taking on missions concerning war and fighting, while the other purposes does the same for their respective areas. It's a neat way of tailoring your camp to various playstyles and ensures that to a big degree, your life doesn't just have to revolve around war and fighting even though you lead a band of mercenaries. And again, these purposes will impact the buildings you can raise in your camp, so changing them up might be smart over time if you wish to diversify your capabilities and opportunities. What I like about the camp is that much like the estates, it can become a lot bigger than you might think, because even though there's only 5 different main camp slots, many of the slots can be expanded with new upgrades even outside of the main branch. This allows you to tailor your camp even further, and you'll be surprised at how long you'll be upgrading and expanding it. Again though, I would have loved for the camp to have the same visual flair as the turning grounds, because I don't find the albeit beautifully drawn artwork here that appealing in a gameplay and immersion sense. The life of an unlanded character is extremely freeing compared to that of a landed one. For one, you may move about as you wish, but you're always seeking out opportunities wherever you go. Depending on where your camp is located, new contracts will show depending on what's going on there and what the local lords need. So while some areas will have lords asking you to join them in a war, help them safeguard a bridge from bandits, or aid them in training their knights, others will ask you to actually act like bandits or wage a war to capture characters from an enemy realm. Now some of these will simply demand that you raise your army and participate in the fighting, and in such cases, your military contribution to the war will often determine the prize money you receive after it, and of course if your contractor wins or not. But other times, and I'd say in the majority of cases, contracts will take on the role of schemes, where you'll invite your campmates to take on various positions in the scheme. The schemes aren't necessarily bad or related to murder, but even if it's about protecting peasants in the area or subduing them, your closest knights and followers will aid in them. Now I do enjoy the various number of contracts, but I must admit that I do find many of these scheming contracts kind of boring, because what happens is that you time and time again will do the same thing. Accept the contract, ask your followers to assume the different scheme positions, wait until you have enough success chance or enough opportunities, and then execute the scheme to various degrees of success. Since this can take some time and follow the same pattern of basically waiting for the scheme to be over, I much prefer the contracts related to fighting wars or escorting a lord from one city to another, since they feel more natural and organic, and moving your army around and fighting is after all quite a lot more fun gameplay wise than clicking on a few characters and waiting for the success meter to fill in. One important aspect of accepting and completing contracts is that you gain hooks of varying degrees on your contractors, and are thus able to extort them for gold, provisions, knights or other goodies. One thing which is a bit confusing though is the marriage aspect of things, because as I found out, it can be difficult to understand how this feature works. I used my hook to try to arrange a marriage between a member of the Castilian royal family or any other potential spouse, but to my frustration, I had literally no options, and the game did not tell me why this was. And even though no marriage happened, I had already spent my hook, which felt like a complete waste, and I was all the more confused for it. It turns out though that one way to get married and carry your adventure legacy over is to seduce a potential partner, ask them to join you in your camp, and then marry them there. I think the game should do a better job of explaining how this works, as this after all is a completely new way to play in more ways than one. I mentioned provisions, and this is the new resource mechanic for unlanded characters. It essentially acts as even more important supply modifiers where your camp and armies need provisions to survive, lest they succumb to starvation, mutiny, and death. And the hate of your followers, which is bad because their loyalty is important to keep high, because a happy camp of followers gives your camp positive modifiers. Provisions are gathered through contracts or events, and you spend provisions when you move your army and camp about, but not when stationary. It's an interesting mechanic that keeps you on your toes, and is arguably a replacement for the gold upkeep you'd have to pay as a landed character. This is of course a great advantage as unlanded, since you neither have to pay upkeep on your men-at-arms nor for characters' positions in your camp. What's so fun about being unlanded is that your allegiance is really only to yourself and the person you've temporarily working for. This means that as El Cid, for example, I completed various contracts for Christian lords in Castile at one point, and then moved south to Toledo in a Muslim taifa at another, helping various lords defeat their masters or aid them in getting from one place to another. And even though you begin as relatively weak, the fact that you expand your men-at-arms with new upgrades and that they cost no upkeep means that after a few years and making good money for contracts, you can end up making a massive regional difference. Your men-at-arms and knights-only army is professional after all, and it's exciting to encounter a much larger levy-based army and defeating them hands down because you're actually fielding armor knights and archers where they are mostly pitchfork carrying peasants. And yes, you can request invasions, or fascinatingly, enemy lords you're fighting against can tempt you with land in their realm if you stop fighting. But importantly, unlanded can make unique decisions once they're powerful enough to become great conquerors, and the new conqueror trait can turn entire regions and continents upside down, since it literally gives you a permanent forced vassalization casus belli, cuts your men-at-arms maintenance by 75%, removes the prestige and piety cost for casus belli, and more. Only a few leaders begin with this trait, like Sultan Saladin for example, but being able to go from unlanded to an unstoppable host and go in the footsteps of an Alexander, Attila, or a Genghis Khan is no small matter, and is an awesome ability. Or of course, you can go on crusade and carve out a crusader state for yourself, if you wanna go landed. In essence, being unlanded is a great way to change up the gameplay of CK3 completely, to play a much more dynamic and vertical shaped campaign where you begin as literally nothing, but may through ability and capability carve out your own empire in the end, unless of course you wish to continue being the most dangerous non-lord in the world. There are so many minor changes to Roads to Power, like the cool Harrowing of the North event for the Norman conquest of England, where you have to subdue your Anglo-Saxon vassals little by little to gain full control of the land, or the entirely new city model for say Constantinople, which like finally, or the new Byzantine Orthodox music. But these are the main aspects of the DLC, and as you can tell, this is a titan of an expansion. And you know what? Probably the best CK3 expansion of all time. Roads to Power is transformative in two ways. First, by drastically changing up the way to administer an administrative empire by actually having to maneuver an internal political realm, not just one based on personal relations, and two, by offering the most revolutionary way to play CK3 since its inception. It gives a completely new life to the game where it's well worth to both return and pick up CK3 finally if you haven't already, since you now essentially have three total different pillars of gameplay, namely the landed traditional way, the administrative way, or the unlanded way. And even though I would still love to see the implementation of complex laws within realms, I'd love to see proper knight and character models while traveling since I hate being a weirdo in rags, and I've encountered a few oddities and bugs where, for example, an enemy ruler who lost a war will pay me for my services in the war fought against them. Roads to Power is so massive, so much fun, and so revolutionary that if you are interested in CK3, you really have no choice but to check it out, and I highly recommend it. Let me know your thoughts on Roads to Power in the comments, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and follow my link below to buy your new game on Instant Gaming for massive discounts. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!